Hey Revolutionaries, I'm excited to bring you this week's episode with Ryan Morgan, where we're talking SEO. Yes, search engine optimization. I know everybody's heard about it, but I don't think that many people understand what it really means or how to deal with it. And I'm excited to have you listen to Ryan share his thoughts on it and also hear about his recent journey into entrepreneurship with the SEO Cohort that he's created. Yeah, SEO Cohort. I like that name, Cohort. But you're going to have to listen to the episode to find out what all that means. It's a really interesting, kind of different approach to helping people learn more about SEO. But one thing I want to share that Ryan shared with us up front here is something about his lifestyle. So this just reminded me that, part of the reinvention revolution as I see it is about lifestyle design. And it was just a great reminder where he shared, he's only a couple months into his entrepreneurial journey. He just started his business, but he's already making more money, spending less time in the office. Basically, he's working remotely now. Still, sees some clients face to face, but, he's able to control his time. And he has a couple small children, and it's really just been a refreshing thing for him personally and for his career and the way he sees the world and business now. And it's just like, we were kind of talking offline, just connecting on our similar experiences of when I first went off on my own years ago and what he's going through now. So that's just a great part that he shares that I forgot about, but I don't want you people that are listening out there to forget about it. That's part of what's all available to us now with all these digital tools in place and the way we can learn and see and access the world. So keep that in mind. But before we get to Ryan's interview, I just wanted to share that I really got some great feedback on the last episode about grief with Maria Alessi. And I just want to say thank you for the people that reached out to me and let me know it meant a lot to them, and that meant a lot to me. And it gives me some confirmation that putting all this time and energy into the podcast is really connecting with people out there and helping them in some small way. Perhaps that's my contribution to the universe with the podcast. For example, I'll share this personal one of the people that got in contact with me. So this was a friend of mine's wife who I haven't seen her in a few years now. Seen them in a few years now. And she reached out to me and said, hey, this was a really interesting episode. It really kind of connected with her. There was some serendipity for her in terms of it kind of arrived for her at the right time with some things that maybe she needed to hear or help her perspective. And she shared with me something I didn't know, and was that back in March, her husband had died, my friend. And so my friend, this guy was... he's an engineer with me at General Motors. He was one of the guys I first met when I got out of school and started working in the professional world. He's about 10 years older than me, and he was a live music fan, and both of them were, as a couple. And we would go out a lot, and he helped me, find new music places in the area. I moved to a new town for the job, and I didn't know that many people. And so we connected over music, and we would hang out, and he became a buddy of mine, and both of them became friends. And I was like, shoot, what a tough experience to go through. But like I said, it helped her in the moment, and it helped us reconnect. So that was fun to talk to her. Of course, sad that her husband and my friend has since passed. But she shared that it helped her, think about things differently. So appreciate that. If you haven't listened to that episode 87 with Marie Alessi, please check it out. And if you know someone else out there who might need to hear it, please share it with them. All right. Okay. So let's get to this week's episode with Ryan Morgan as he shares with us his thoughts on SEO and his story. Let's get to it.
Welcome to Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast, the show that explores reinvention in the digital age as it relates to career, creativity, and technology. Stay tuned for interviews with professionals, entrepreneurs, and creatives that have reimagined success and are making a pivot. If you'd like to listen to the entire back catalog, visit JimJim'sReinventionRevolution.com for instant access. And now, here's your host, Jim Jim.
Hey everybody, hey, this is Jim Jim. Welcome to episode 88 of Jim Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast. And I'm talking today with Ryan Morgan, and we're talking SEO. So Ryan, let's get into it. Welcome to the Reinvention Revolution.
Hey Jim, good to talk to you.
Hey, well, thanks for joining me this morning. I'm really excited to dig into it with you because I know that you have this new business you started, the SEO Cohort, and you're an entrepreneurial newbie of sorts, right? So you're just digging into the scene, and I'm really curious to kind of hear your thoughts and how things have been going for you. But before we get there, I don't think I've had a specific episode on SEO. I've had some other digital marketers on and things of this nature, but I think SEO is important overall for anyone out there who's, trying to start a new business on their own or just trying to understand the world of the web a little bit better, in terms of we're all using, search engines to search out there. And I'm thinking about it externally as well as internally. So, if you're working in a big corporation, for example, and you're writing research reports, or you're a head of HR and you're interviewing 1,000 people, it's like, how do you find that one candidate? Where'd you save that file? Maybe you can kind of give some perspectives of, I think everybody knows what SEO is these days, the term, but what is for, how people use it, and think about all the aspects, where it applies, I guess, externally, internally, in terms of business. So tell us about SEO.
It's a great question. And, I think you're right. I think most people have heard of SEO. They probably know it stands for search engine optimization. And, some may know a little bit, enough to be dangerous. Right. Some may have, some understanding, but as you know, it's constantly evolving. The way that Google and search engines operate is constantly evolving. And when you think about the applications, for most websites, organic search, which is, what search engine optimization really tries to drive, is often the primary source of their website traffic. That's where most of their traffic is coming from, especially for, newer websites, startups, things like that. And it's really this place where organizations, websites, nonprofits can build trust and credibility. So if you're able to be found for the things that your audience is searching for, it's going to build that trust. It's going to build that credibility. It's going to build that awareness. And as we talked about, it's really evolved. And you mentioned some great examples. I mean, I think, marketing is traditionally the unit within an organization that has kind of owned SEO, maybe marketing, maybe a little bit of IT, in that they are really trying to drive traffic to the website. But you mentioned a couple other great examples. I mean, HR, think about, this ongoing challenge that organizations have in trying to find talent. And if they can use SEO to really find qualified candidates, individuals that are looking for very specific jobs, maybe they're looking for, an engineering job that is remote and that offers certain kind of benefits or works in certain kinds of technologies. If you're able to really optimize your job listings or the information on your site that allows that person to connect with your organization, I mean, what a boon, what an advantage it gives you over competitors that are looking to hire that same talent. So it really, it does go beyond marketing these days, and it kind of touches every aspect of your business.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, there's so many, when I started really just thinking about it, because I knew I was going to talk to you today, I was like, there's just 1,000,001 use cases now. I think early on people had this understanding of like, oh, that's for, website traffic, like you said, which is obviously a huge part of it, but it's more nuanced. And now everything is, obviously we're getting more digitized with everything we're doing. And so it's just nice to have a great understanding of like, what does that mean exactly? And how should I think about when I'm putting together content of any kind? So here's another question for you. Maybe it's too loaded up front here with too many questions, ideas here, but initially it was the web and the internet was text-based, okay? Now it's content-based, whatever that means. It's audio, could be visual images or graphics. Like here's an example. I was just fooling around with my Google Photos app because I want to get a new phone. By the way, get out there and get your new phone soon because there's not much stock out there, which I found out. But so I was trying to find some pictures, make sure I had some things saved, and I don't mess around with search that much. But I just imagined like, well, let me try this, and I was searching for a picture of me with a tiger. Crazy picture, but I thought, and I didn't tag any of these things.
You're prepping for Tiger King 2,
exactly. Well, I was over in Thailand just messing around, but whatever. It's like, oh, just a funny picture that I want to make sure was saved. And I'm like, how do I search this thing? Like, so do I search Thailand? Do I search me? Whatever. I just decided, because I have no knowledge of how this works or if it would work, I just popped in the word, I'm just going to search for tiger. And somehow Google has already tagged it with some AI bot or whatever, must have looked at the image, knew there was a tiger in it, and served it right back to me. I mean, that's pretty phenomenal in terms of like how this technology is working now. And now I know that you can do this with audio because we're in the podcasting world. I'm in the podcasting world, and there's audio searching going on now, visual searching, and video searching. So in terms of digging into this topic, how do you approach it in terms of, if you're trying to develop a business or just to try to develop your understanding of SEO? Where do you start?
So I love this question because it really does speak to how search engines have changed over time. You mentioned that at one point in time, much of the information was text-based, right? So much of the information on websites was text-based, and when you did a search in Google, for example, you would get this list of 10 blue links with a little bit of content, right? Now, I would challenge anyone to go out there and do a search, and the kind of results you get on the search page are wildly different. You are going to get a mix of, some links. You're going to get photos. You're going to get videos. You're going to get recent news articles. You're going to get questions that people ask. You are going to get location-based results. You are going to get recipes. You're going to get quick answers. You're going to get all kinds of different things. And the way Google has evolved is Google, its main purpose, whether you believe that Google is good or ultimately bad is besides the point. The purpose of the search engine is really to provide you with information and do it in the best way possible. So if I'm searching for peanut butter and jelly, for example, it may give me recipes for peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. It may give me pictures of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. It may give me restaurants or local listings that, have peanut butter and jelly on the menu. And this is really foundationally kind of the idea of what's called structured data. It's the idea that, as marketers or individuals that have a website, we can structure and tell Google what kind of information is on our site. And Google is doing a lot of this, as you mentioned, AI. Google is doing a lot of this on their own. So much of the time, they don't need us to tell them that this is a recipe or this is a video or this is an image. But it has really changed what you get in the search results. And it means that now, let's say you have a business or you're on a marketing or IT team and you're trying to get some of that information into the search engines. It's not always just that blue link with a little bit of text.
Right.
If someone asks, what's the capital of Ohio? That answer is going to show up right in the search results. It's not going to give you a link. And that's the idea of structured data, really pulling that information from a source, from a website into the search results. And this is actually, it's kind of this twofold. It's great in that it allows individuals to get their content directly into the search page, whether it be videos, whether it be content in written form, whether it be, their business on a map. It's also challenging because more and more Google is keeping searchers on the search page and actually not going to the websites themselves. So as marketers, we need to kind of adapt to that new reality.
Interesting. Well, okay, so we have all these crazy media types, and you gave us that laundry list of other results. I wasn't thinking like recipes. That's a cool thing. But you're right. It's and I noticed some podcasts start coming up too. Some like recommendations, like with those things in the title or the topics or whatever, which is pretty interesting. But okay, so as a business owner or as a just a solo entrepreneur or whatever it is, if you're trying to build something on the web and you're trying to structure your content to be optimized for this search engine out there where people are searching, and you want your results to come up or come up higher in the search cases, what do you do how should you start thinking about that? Because I'm sure there's a million things you could do, using the right words or titles or tags or whatever it is, but how do you form it? How do you think about it? Do you search for keywords first and then write around it, or what do you do?
It's such a great question, and many of the small business owners and entrepreneurs that I work with, again, they know that SEO is important, has value, but it's always that question of, where do I start? There's so many things that I can do. How do I prioritize? And I think oftentimes SEO can be this daunting thing that can seem very technical in nature. So here's kind of the priority list of how I would think about things. Mm-hmm. Top of the list, top of the pyramid, exactly where I would start is focusing on producing high quality content. This isn't the search engines of 2010, 2005, 2000, where you can kind of game the system by jamming as many keywords into your copy as you can and tricking Google into thinking that your page is, the page that is the authority on a specific subject.
Right.
As you mentioned, AI, machine learning, Google really now understands how to look at the content and context of a page and see if it is actually solving the user's query. Mm-hmm. So the words that I would suggest are original content, unique content, and valuable content. If you can do that, you're already going to be ahead of the game. And I think when a lot of entrepreneurs or business owners think about SEO, they think about, I have to create all this, kind of new content. And the reality is, I think if your content can provide the best information or answers for a user query, you're already ahead. And I would encourage, I've worked with many business owners and entrepreneurs that just need that place to start. A great place to start is to think about a couple of your high value pages. For entrepreneurs and business owners, this is often, a product or a service page. They're high value pages, mm-hmm. not the About Us page, not the home page, but right. The high value product or service pages. And you mentioned keywords. I think keywords are important. It's important for a page to have kind of one focus, right? If your page is trying to focus on 5 keywords, it's going to be far too diluted. Google's not going to understand what the page is about, what it's for, who it's trying to serve. Mm-hmm. So focusing on one topic and focus on that page being the best resource for that keyword or topic or theme. And there's a couple, kind of quick tips that I can give. First of all, I would recommend thinking about what are the questions that people ask when they're looking for information on this topic. And this can be a product or a service or just an informational page. Mm-hmm. And there are so many easy ways to get this information. The first is literally just to think about, your sales team or your customer service team and ask them, what are the questions that you get when you're talking with potential customers about this? You can also think about, what are, when you go into Google, one of my favorite tools is they have this people also ask, kind of snippet in the search results. Mm-hmm. So if I searched for consulting services, for example, and you can do this right now, anyone listening can go in and search for kind of your main product or service. It will, in the search results, give you a people also ask. And this is Google telling you the information that people want about that specific topic. And it's a really great resource for you to add content or context to that page. So that's where I always start, is making sure that your content is original, unique, valuable, and really solving the user query. After that, and I don't want to go too deep here, but the other things that I would recommend in terms of those crucial components for SEO today, number 2 on that list would be user experience. And Google has put a lot of emphasis on sites that they're showing in their search results being mobile friendly, because we all know that, so many people are, looking for these results from a non-desktop device. Number 2 is that they're secure. So Google has placed a high emphasis on security. That's a simple making sure that your site is HTTPS secured, that you have an SSL certificate. Speed, fast loading, because Google knows that we're now looking for these results all over the world. And some of these places don't have high-speed internet. So they're really placing an emphasis on sites that load quickly and that they're easy to navigate. Again, because when we're on a mobile device and we have to do a lot of pinching and zooming, and it's hard to tap on buttons and it's hard to see text and things like that, Google doesn't want to drive traffic to sites that have poor user experience. They want the user to have a really positive experience. So those 2 things to me are the top 2 things today, and that's obviously very different than what we've seen in the past.
Right. Okay, that's a good insight. Yeah, I wasn't thinking about the user experience part, that Google was taking that into account. So that's interesting. And the first one you mentioned, the way I think of it is, it's all about the customer journey. So that's like, when you're out there, you got to put yourself in the shoes of the client, customer, whoever you're trying to attract. It's like, how do they go starting to search about this? Is it word of mouth? Do they get online? What are the phrases they use? And even in terms of typing in, I would think about voice as well. So like, if you're driving in the car, a lot of searches start off with like, hey Google, blah, 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 and it might be a different phrase that you speak versus what you would sit down and type at a computer or in your device. Just linguistically, or just how you think differently when you're typing versus speaking.
It's spot on, and it's actually one of the really common mistakes that I see business owners and entrepreneurs making, is that they write from their internal perspective, their company perspective, and you can think about all the challenges that come with that they may be using kind of industry vocabulary or acronyms or terms that their audience isn't using, right?
Right.
They may be talking about their products or services, but not the benefits or the solutions, and you're exactly right. They need to take themselves out of their shoes and put themselves in the shoes of the audience. And this is where we mentioned this before. This is where keyword research comes into play. And I think, you kind of ask the question, do you kind of do the research before? Do you do it after? So I'm a proponent of, when you're writing copy for the web, or when you're trying to plan out the content that you're going to have on your site, doing the research before, because it's not only going to help you write better optimized content, but it's going to help inform you what that user is looking for. It kind of always it ties back into what we're talking about now. So let's say that I'm writing a page on management consulting services. I'll just do something kind of easy. What I want to do is understand, number one, what are some of the keywords that people are looking for example, and I really like to look at both search volume and competition. And if you think about it, management consulting services, for the average small business, they're never going to compete in that space, right? I mean, you're going to be competing with the big management, the national, international management consulting services.
Right.
So potentially niching down, and if your organization specializes in, for example, management consulting services for nonprofits, it's a much better kind of target or topic, because there's going to be probably a little bit less search volume, but a lot less competition.
Right.
So now I understand how I can kind of focus my content a little bit more rather than being very broad and just kind of getting, caught up in the ocean of all this other really competitive content that's out there. And then I really do like to understand the questions that people are asking around this topic. There's a couple really great free tools that I like. I already told you about in Google. I love the People Also Ask tool.
Mm-hmm.
This is literally just type any query into Google and most search results will come back with this People Also Ask section. There's also a great free tool called Answer the Public. It's answerthepublic.com. I'm not affiliated with them. I just love the tool.
Okay.
And you can type in any keyword or key phrase, and it will give you the most common questions that people ask about that. And
really?
These are
okay.
just
Interesting.
Yeah, these are just great ways to guide your content, right? To understand what users are looking for. And if you have that information before you start producing the content for a page,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be much more guided, much more focused, and it's going to typically result in better results in search.
I see. Interesting. This reminds me, I heard about another technique, again, kind of a free technique out there, is to watch the automatic fill-in results in the search bar when you're just starting to type into Google. So if you're trying to think about, what people are really searching on the web, what's trending or something like that, like you could just start typing anything into Google and the autofill starts filling stuff in. Those are things that people are another way to show of what people are searching for or asking about.
It's another great technique for SEO as well. You're absolutely right. And, this works. Let's use our management consulting example. If you go into Google and type in management consulting for, and just stop right there,
right.
See what Google tells you, right? And see if there are specific industries or specific applications that may be more unique that are aligned with your business. But again, this it's a really great tool to help you niche down. It works for services, for product. And if we're trying to rank for running shoes, we're never going to get on page one. We have way too much competition between brands and retailers. But if we go and use your tip, shoes for,
mm-hmm.
and just see what it says, we're probably going to get, for example, for ultra marathon runners. Okay, now maybe that's a unique niche that we can serve. So there's lots of opportunities there as well. And when we think about that auto suggest little trick, there's a couple ways you can do that. You can use it for niching down, which we just talked about. You can also use it for comparison's sake. So for example, let's take a software company. One of the great things that you can do is look for alternatives or verses. So I'll just use the example. I think a lot of people know Evernote, for example. Evernote is a online note-taking platform. But let's say that you had a SaaS company that was kind of in the mix here. You wanted to compete with them. You can type in Evernote alternatives or Evernote versus and see what else is in the mix there.
Okay.
So there's lots of different applications that you can use this auto suggest for to give you ideas about what content you should be writing.
I see. Yeah, and then build your content around that to serve that query. Interesting.
Right.
Well, that's cool. Well, okay, so thanks for going down the rabbit hole with some of this technical stuff, because I think people just need to, just understand it a little bit better. And if they're even more interested and they want to actually educate themselves, this is where your SEO cohort comes in. So tell people about what that is, because you're this SEO guru now, and you're creating more tribe members as we go here in the future. It sounds like. So tell everybody what that is.
Yeah, so the SEO cohort is a cohort-based training program around SEO. And the cohort model is really meant to be focused on mentorship and peer-based learning. So we take at max a group of 20 people. We do live instructor-led training. So I'm the instructor of these courses. I take all of my knowledge. I've been doing this for 15 plus years. And we really teach individuals you can have zero SEO knowledge. You can have, maybe enough to be dangerous. and take you to that level where you can comfortably, internally be an SEO expert, be the individual that knows SEO within your organization. For business owners and entrepreneurs, this is a great way to identify what's the path that I need to take to really emphasize SEO and grow traffic to my site within my organization or my startup, my small business. And it's a mix of live learning. We work on real projects. So one of the big reasons I wanted to start this is there's a lot of training out there, a lot of SEO training that's, just video based. You go and watch a series of videos and then you're kind of on your own, and it's really missing the application. And what I've seen in my career is this kind of training works when you have mentoring and when you have real application. So students can come to this program, they can work on real applications, they can bring their own, organizational work, business work, they can use their own website and work through all of the projects that we work on with their own real life applications. And they're going to graduate this program not only with a deep knowledge of how to grow website traffic and how to gain exposure through SEO, but also with a network of peers that they can go back to and network with and, go for questions and ideas and things like that. So it's an idea that I am hugely passionate about and believe in. And if anyone's interested in, taking that journey, the SEO Cohort.com is where you can find it.
Right. Okay. Well, it sounds great. And one of the reasons why I was attracted to it was just like you said, you're basing it around real world examples. So you want people, coming to the party with, okay, what's your issue? What's your problem? What are you trying to solve? Who are you trying to attract? And you're going to use that as an example as you go through the course. And I was thinking maybe that's something I should be doing because I don't do a lot of SEO. Maybe I've done a little bit more than I know of, perhaps, in terms of building traffic for the website or for my email list. But I was like, maybe I need to learn a little bit more about this myself. So I like the structure of how you're doing it, and that's kind of the way this whole thing is kind of evolving. Where there was, before it was more like, well, here's a course, and it was just sort of a canned course or something else. Now this cohort idea is just another nuanced way to present information to people. Really cool. Well, okay, so enough of the waiting here. I've been like, I hope people are getting an idea. Like, hey, man, this Ryan's a cool dude. I want to hear about his SEO journey, really, about how you got here and why you decided to put the cohort together. What was going on with you beforehand, and why do you think that creating your own business and becoming an entrepreneur is right for you now?
Yeah, so I'll share a couple aspects of that journey. As I mentioned, I've been in the digital marketing space for 15 plus years. I spent about 10 years at the beginning of my career on the organizational side, inside an organization, building up a digital marketing team, leading the digital marketing efforts there. And then I transitioned to the agency side and have been working on the agency side for the last 6 years or so. And really within the last year or two, I think this is probably where, I have a lot of similarities with your audience, was starting to feel the burnout. Some of the things that were happening within, and these are, I would say, small to mid-size agencies, just to give people a sense of the size.
How many people does that mean when you say small to mid-size?
So I would say 25 people on average,
okay.
Right?
Okay.
So usually when I think of small, oftentimes small agencies are 4 to 5 people. Other people may have different definitions.
Right. Okay.
These were both fast growing, and when I mean fast growing, I mean doubling in size, tripling in size, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're not talking fast growing as in 100 to 1,000 employees, but we're talking 4 to 20, or we're talking about 5 to 25. So what was happening, especially post-COVID era, when the transition for a digital agency into remote work, not very challenging, right? We're very digital already.
Right.
That in and of itself isn't challenging. But for anyone that has worked in an agency or is thinking about it, there's lots of agencies out there. So my experience may not reflect others. But what I'm seeing is, agencies can be associated with a lot of burnout. There's a lot of work, and it suits a certain lifestyle. But post-COVID era, at the first agency I was at, I lost my top 4 performers, my top 4 employees within a period of about 9 months. And to give some perspective, this is like 4 out of 10 people. This isn't like 4 out of 100 people.
Right.
And you can imagine, so a couple things happen when I lose an individual. Not only is it challenging because these are people that are very close to me, but at the same time, a lot of that work falls onto me as the leader of the organization within the organization. And then I'm kind of dually tasked with replacing them and finding other top talent out there. So there's a lot of things converging at one time. And the theme with these transitions was these individuals were going to organizational or corporate roles where they made, probably 20% more and probably had 30% less work to do.
Right. So good for them, I guess, right?
Right. So very bittersweet. You hate to lose someone. You love to see someone in a better position. And I'm still close with all of these individuals today who are, these were people that I mentored. And this is, starting to go along the path of why I started this cohort is these people came into roles and they didn't, most of them didn't know SEO. They didn't have a whole kind of digital marketing skill set. And I worked with them and I saw them apply these things on the job. And then they were able to take those and, I'll say leverage them into SEO director positions, digital marketing manager positions, really high quality positions within corporate organizations. And so wonderful for them. They were able to take those skills that are really in demand and really transferable.
Right.
But for me, a lot of burnout, as you can imagine. And I, in early this year, early in 2021, made the decision that I needed to change something. And I wasn't sure what that was. I was at this kind of crossroads of, do I look for another position? Is it just the agency? I was thinking about, I've always been passionate about teaching. I'll kind of talk about that in a second.
Okay.
I was thinking, do I go on more of the contractor consulting route? I was even thinking about taking a sabbatical. I was burnt out.
Okay.
And
why didn't you think about going on the same track? Just because you were so burnt out, you just like, I don't want to go to that corporate world, even though it would be less pressure. Why didn't you follow some of your folks to these other opportunities?
Yeah, I had some of those opportunities as I was exploring this, and they weren't necessarily at organizations that would give me the diversity of work that I had come to like.
Okay.
So it's this kind of trade-off. When you work at an agency, you get to work with a lot of different organizations, a lot of different industries, and I find that fascinating, learning about an industry that I've never worked in. Great example is I worked with a great client in the robotic industrial automation industry, something I knew nothing about, and found it absolutely fascinating and got to go tour their facility that has these amazing FANUC robots that are, completely automating manufacturing tasks. And this is something that I'd never known about before and became a borderline expert on, understanding the industry and the products. So, I had still craved that. And on the organizational side, I think it would have to be an organization that I was incredibly passionate about. And I just didn't find that. So what I did was I joined another agency, an agency that I thought
it's going to be different this time.
Right. You're spot on. It's going to be different this time. This is and it was and is a wonderful group of people, an organization that is very mission driven, works with mission driven organizations. But, probably 2 to 3 months in, I realized after that, kind of new job haze wore off. I realized, okay, it's not the place. it's the structure, because this agency was going through all the same growing pains and challenges as the previous agency.
Right.
And this time what I did was I recognized that, and I decided, okay, I'm going to have a conversation with the owner of this organization and say, I'm not the long-term solution here. I'm just going back into this pattern of burnout and these challenges. And I kind of gave them this longer runway to make sure I transitioned in the right way, and ultimately still do some consulting work with them. Great organization, have nothing great to say. But for me, as you mentioned, I started my entrepreneurial journey on October 1st of this year. We're talking on November 3rd, and
right.
It's been a wonderful transition. It's been what I think I've been looking for, in having the flexibility and still having the diversity of work, and now really being able to pursue one of my passion projects, which is the SEO Cohort, without being really having the stress and being kind of bogged down by the normal 9 to 5.
I see. Now, did you end up leaving kind of cold turkey and deciding, okay, that's it, I'm out of here. I really made the decision. I'm not doing this type of thing anymore. Or was there a transition, or are you still kind of going back and consulting back and forth, or?
Yeah. So when I made this decision, I made the decision definitively that I wasn't going to work full time for an organization anymore. And that I was going to, what I ended up doing is opening up my own digital marketing consultancy, and that's called Swell. And what has happened is I transitioned with this organization for about 2 months. That was, maybe that's abnormal, but it's always been really important to me to make sure that I transition in the right way.
Sure.
So it was a long transition, but now this agency is one of my main clients. I am doing consulting work, and I'm doing work that I love. I'm still incredibly passionate about digital marketing, and those are some of the things that I love. I love doing the strategic and tactical work, and I love teaching. I don't necessarily miss being in meetings all day long. I don't miss some of the other things that were really burning me out, as you can imagine. Right. So now I have my full-time job is my own consultancy, where I have, a couple of digital marketing clients that I'm doing work for that I'm incredibly happy with. And I'm pursuing this passion project of mine, which is sharing some of my knowledge and trying to teach others how they can leverage SEO.
Oh, well, I really love it. Can you talk about the lifestyle aspect of it? So we were talking before offline how like when I first quit my job, this is back in 2006, and I kind of just lucked into this consulting kind of new career kind of thing for me. How it was like I worked less time, made more money, like just right from the get-go. It was just like a real revelation. Maybe you can describe that for everybody, because I know people out there are thinking like, this is hard to do. What could I do? I'm nervous about it, but how would it really impact my life? I think this is an important part to bring out.
Yeah. And I know this is so much of what your podcast is about, and so much of why I love the podcast and love these conversations. So a little background on me. I have 3 kids under the age of 10, and it's a big part of my life, obviously. And one of the things that I was finding when I was, in this stage of burnout is it was not allowing me to be a great dad. And what I mean by that, it wasn't usually a time thing. I know there are lots of people that are struggling with, I work so much that I don't have enough time to give to my kids.
Right.
That is very real, obviously. For me, it was actually more of a mental energy kind of thing. I would be so mentally burnt out by my work during the day that I didn't have a whole lot to give to my kids at the end of the day. And I felt guilty about that, and I didn't like that aspect. And that was really what made me kind of reflect and decide that I needed a change. I needed to change that, because my kids are not going to be getting any younger. And this is the time for any parents that are listening to this podcast. This is, this is the time that you have this great opportunity to be there and to be present and to be a big part of their lives. And the change for me has been really impactful in that way. I am, since this transition, both physically and mentally more flexible and free. I take my kids to the bus and pick them up every day. That may sound like a small thing, but it's a really impactful change for me. I can decide when I want to do work. So I'm one of those people that I can get into pockets where I can do deep work and do it really well. I can also be in times where I am not in the zone. This has really allowed me to have a lot of flexibility to really, make my own schedule. And I think, again, so for me, there was no safety net, right? There's being married and having 3 kids. There is a certain insurance with having a full-time job and having a steady paycheck. For and sure. I'm sure a lot of your listeners can relate to that. Transition is scary. And for me, it was the same. It was, I want to make sure that I can still, have the security of making sure that, we have a roof over our heads and I'm able to feed my kids. And it hasn't been a concern at all. Like you said, this first month, I've had the most flexibility that I've had probably since I started working. And I've made the most money that I've made in my entire career.
Right. Yeah. Pretty, it's a pretty incredible feeling. And it's just sort of like I said, it's sort of a revelation. It's like, oh, wow, this can really happen, or this is how it might happen, or whatever. I know you're still learning every day, just like I am still, even, I'm years in. It's just always a work in progress. But I just think it's so, powerful to hear that from a real voice, from someone who's really just in the middle of this transition, where it's like, I think it's such an interesting moment in time in history where, the world's opened up through this technology thing that we're doing, like just the podcast that we're even talking on here. And there's just a lot of opportunity to do these types of things in a different way, work in a different way, have a different type of lifestyle, more flexible, whatever you might need, depending on the nature of your work or whatever it might be. So just interesting to dig into it and hear, what went into your decision-making process in terms of figuring it out, not really throwing caution to the wind, but like you said, now's the time. You can't get this time back with your kids. And the way I think about time now is like, I don't know if you've read The Power of Now. I think we talked about that, but people out there, read The Power of Now. It's one of my favorite books I always talk about. And it's just a reminder that, all we have is now. Tomorrow's not guaranteed, and the actions you take in the moment right now really have a big effect, because that's it. This is all we get, just the present moment. And if you start making the right decisions, you really can really live, I think, a more fruitful life, or a more interesting life, or positive life, or have an impact on the people that you're interested in having an impact on. So I'm glad you're really made this transition. It's really cool. And because of that, there's always a couple of questions I like to ask people when they get into this process, again, to help everybody who's listening out there kind of think about their own process. And one is about technology. So you happen to be in this technical field, and so you're sort of, like you said, it's kind of easier for a digital marketing person to kind of go out on their own, or be a little bit more entrepreneurial, because you understand how the technologies work. How do you think about technology, and where did that skill set come from? Because I remember you mentioned something about helping out your dad when you were younger, so maybe you can share that with people. And because he's got an interesting story about his own reinvention, I guess.
He does, yeah. So this is there's a whole background here. So, and it ties into technology and it ties into the teaching aspect. So my dad, who is really someone that I look up to, was a teacher for his entire career, and he started off as an English teacher. And in the early 90s, when personal computers were just starting to be something that people knew about, my dad was one of the first people that started to realize that this is something that we should bring into the school and we should give access to students. Now, fortunately, my dad worked for a private school in the greater Cleveland area, and they were able to afford and invest in personal computers and started one of the first computer science programs in the country. And so this was something that was always part of my childhood. My dad always had a computer in the basement that I could play around with. We had the Apple IIe, and this was something that I was, could get into early on. And fast forward a little bit, my dad, as this program evolved at the school that my dad was teaching at, he developed a summer computer camp for kids that were really interested in computers and, technology and science. Mm-hmm. This was kind of, an alternative summer camp for kids that were really interested in these things. And the second I was able to, I think at the age of 14, just like you have summer camp counselors at summer camp, I was a camp counselor at computer camp. And I would teach graphic design using early graphic design software. We would teach audio editing. We would teach a lot of different things. And obviously that technology has evolved, but this is really where my interest started. And I was teaching, I was 14 teaching 7 and 8-year-olds how to use, Paint and Photoshop Pro and some of these really early graphics programs and create simple animations and create their own graphics. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it, and kind of continued that. And as I started my career kind of as a graphic designer. I went to school for a mix of marketing and studio art, and really kind of combined that to start as a graphic designer, and really morphed into a web designer, and then kind of fell in love with the web and digital marketing, and my career has evolved since then. But the one theme has really been that I have loved teaching other people how to do these things, whether it was in the early stages, graphic design, or web design or digital marketing, and now obviously my focus being SEO. And if I look at kind of the piece of my career that I say, this is one thing that I've always been really passionate about, and this is where I think I can put a stamp on and say, this is where I was really successful. I can look at some of the people that I've coached and mentored over time and look at their trajectory and how successful they've been. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably one of the most meaningful things that I've done in my career.
I see. Okay, awesome. Well, I'm just listening to you, and I'm kind of getting chills just listening to your talk about it, because it's just, when you really find your passion and start to align to it, it's really, your life can open up in a lot of different ways. And that's what I found personally in terms of my journey. And so I see that you're just really starting to open up this journey wide right now in terms of all this stuff, all the culmination of all these years of experience and things, and getting to know yourself and realizing, I really like to do this. This is fun. I'm getting a lot out of it. And the people that you're working with benefit a lot out of it. So that's really cool. And I wanted people to hear that story about your dad, because your dad was a non-technical person. He was an English teacher, right? But he decided to kind of open his mind and think like, oh, this is interesting. I see the future here. And, look at all the cool things that have happened because of his decision, right? So again, just kind of, I always try to figure out ways to try to crack people's minds open a little bit of like, I can't do that. I'm not technical. I'm not made out for this. I'm not an entrepreneur. I've never run a business, whatever it might be. It's just a mindset thing,
Yeah. And he did that, he made that transition from non-technical to technical, purely based on interest, like we talked about. Yeah. But he also did it when this wasn't widely accepted. This, personal computers in being integrated into schools and curriculum, this was an uphill battle to convince to convince the higher ups at a private school in Cleveland, Ohio, that this was going to be the future and this was an important skill that kids were going to need to learn. And he pushed that agenda. And I think that's a really cool thing to be able to say, not everyone is seeing this, but I'm seeing this, and I think it's important enough that I'm going to kind of fight for this. And he was right. Obviously,
Yeah.
fast forward now 30 years,
Right.
and where would we be without, those kind of programs?
Well, that's right. Wow. Certainly those kids that were the early, his early pupils or whatever, they must be thinking like, man, that was cool. We had a little extra edge on everybody else growing up,
Absolutely.
Yeah, cool. Well, I got one final question for you, and that is through your journey thus far, and you're diving into entrepreneurship and starting your own this cohort that's really based around your one of your passions and something you really feel strongly about. Can you share a reinvention revelation with everyone that something that can help them along their journey, something that you found out maybe about yourself or about business so far?
Yeah, so I think there's probably a couple things. I mean, the one thing we've talked about is to really, this may sound a little bit cheesy, but to follow your passion, I think, is one of the most important things. And for me, I've always worked in an area where I was really passionate, but now as I continue to evaluate, especially this year, as I continue to evaluate what I want to do with my career, what I want to do with my life. I mean, there's a list of, you could literally write down what are the times that I've been most happy? What are the things that I'm most passionate about? And how do I do more of that? Right. Mm-hmm. And that for me is what produced this idea of this cohort, which is I'm most happy and I feel most proud when I'm teaching others and when I can see that it's really changing their lives. It's really, allowing them to transform their careers. And I leaned into that. I reflected a lot about that and I leaned into that. And that's been a really big revelation for me, is really just trying to focus on what are the things that have made me absolutely, happy and proud in my career. And then vice versa. What are the areas that give me, I think a lot of people are evaluating this right now. Mm-hmm. What are the areas that give me the most stress and tension? I recognized in my life that I was carrying this stress into my personal life, right? I wasn't having a lot of mental energy for engaging with my kids, which was not something that I wanted to continue. And, conversely, I wanted to evaluate what was causing that. And that was really what made me identify I need to, probably divorce myself from being in the day-to-day organizational full-time role and try this other thing and go out on my own so that I can separate myself from a lot of these stressors that I'm finding. Now, that might not be everyone. There are great full-time jobs out there, but for me, this is what has worked. And I think just that reflection is great. I'm sure a lot of people in the last year and a half have been doing this kind of reflection. Obviously, we're seeing this as a culture, but I would encourage everyone to really think about what are the things, if you think about your career, if you think about your life, what are the things that have made you really happy and that you've been really proud of, and how can you reinvent or create a life or a career around those things? And then vice versa, what are the things that you found most challenging and how can you pivot away from those things? And that's been, my journey for the last year or so. And as I told you, it took a failed attempt, right? I made I don't regret that decision. It was a great learning experience and I probably needed to go through that to figure out how I get here today.
Absolutely.
But I think that journey of exploration was really worth it for me.
Yeah, for sure. Well, in the entrepreneurial world, they always say fail fast. Just go out because that's required really on your path to success. So, I wouldn't be afraid of it. Again, don't throw caution to the wind, but don't be afraid of trying something. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But you'll be informed, much more informed as to what you like or what will work going forward. So. Just don't be afraid to get your hands dirty in that regard. Well, Ryan, thanks so much for being on the podcast. Again, for people that are interested in the SEO cohort or getting in touch with you about your other consulting stuff, where would you send them?
Yeah, so if you're interested in joining me and joining other peers for the SEO cohort, you can go to the SEOcohort.com. We have our first sessions are starting in January. I'm incredibly excited about this. And for anyone else that wants to get in touch with me, I'm on LinkedIn. Go find me, make a connection. Happy to chat with anyone.
Okay, and those links, of course, will be in the show notes. And again, starting in January, it's a 5-week course or something like that?
So we've got two options, ideal for kind of working professionals. So we've got a 5-week option once a week in the evenings. And then we've got an accelerated option that you can knock this thing out in 2.5 days, Wednesday, Thursday, half a day, Friday. And you get all the same curriculum, the same benefits, whatever works for your working lifestyle. We want to make sure that we build these for working professionals.
I gotcha. Sounds awesome. Okay. Well, thanks, Ryan. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you for listening to Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast. If you want to hear more, join our mailing list at jimreinventionrevolution.com. See you next time. And remember, the revolution has just begun. So dig in, embrace the process of reinvention, and start realizing the success you've always dreamed of. Hey, revolutionaries, if you enjoyed today's episode and today's guest, let them know by commenting on their Facebook page, finding their Twitter handle or Instagram feed, and letting them know you heard them on Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast, and tell them what you got out of the episode, what you really liked, or how they inspired you. I know they would get a kick out of it and will help others find the same value that you found.